This photo was taken on an iPhone, and this photo was taken on my professional photography camera, but they look super similar. So how did they get that way? Well, I edited them to look similar. That's the real fact. But how did I do it? Let's get into it.
Work hard, rest often.
What is going on, everyone? If you're new around here, my name is Finn Badgley. I'm a commercial fashion and portrait photographer, and I did a little comparison between my iPhone and my professional photography camera. You can check out a full video between the two up here, but this is actually how I took photos from my iPhone 13 Pro and made them look like my professional photography camera, the Canon EOS R. Now, for this, a lot of these photos that I took on the iPhone, the blur wasn't there originally because I didn't want to take them using the telephoto lens. I wanted to take them using the regular lens, but that doesn't have a blur because portrait mode is only on the telephoto lens. So I had to add that in myself. And there are other ones that I did take using the telephoto lens, but I knew that portrait mode tracking a moving subject could get a little iffy because here's me with the camera. Here's the model. We're doing this. And if the background is continuously moving, that camera has to continuously adjust for that. And I knew it was going to get a little wonky. So I knew that if I could edit in the blur afterwards, that it would look better. Now, how exactly did I do this? And yes, I know I kind of did this pretty quick, so it's not exactly perfect, but this is a good general way that you can do this to make your iPhone photos look more professional. Now, right off the bat, one thing I wanted to do was color grade them to look just about identical. Now, I did my basic color grade on my Canon photo first to get the look that I wanted. And then all I had to do was match that with the iPhone. But what I realized is they have very different color profiles. So I went into Lightroom and Photoshop and played around with a bunch of different settings until I could get them kind of how I wanted them. And for some of these, you could tell the background was a little more blown out on the Canon EOS R. And I actually liked the look of that. That was the look I wanted. So I made a radial filter, upped the exposure a bit, and actually put a little bit of haze on that using the dehaze tool to make it that glowy look, which is a great way to emulate that if you don't get it in camera. Now, beyond the overall color grade, I noticed that iPhone photos typically can be similar to most cell phone photos, a little over sharpened. Now, I know Apple isn't the worst manufacturer for this, but they do still do it a little bit. So I could have taken down the clarity, but that would make things look a little weird, and I didn't really want that. Clarity is kind of your mid-tone contrast. It's how you get a grittier looking image, and texture is more related to sharpness than clarity is. So I took down the texture about 10 points, and then suddenly you can see it has a bit more of that look that we're more used to. It's not super digitally sharp, which is usually a dead giveaway of a cell phone photo. And if that wasn't enough, I would bring the sharpness down a little bit as well. So that way you're getting a closer image there. But now the real kicker is, how did I manage to take that and give it that blur? Now, the standard way to blur things in Adobe Photoshop is using the Gaussian, however you say it, blur. And it's good if you don't need it to look like it was taken on a lens. That's a good way to put it. It'll blur things, it'll kind of smudge them all together, but it won't look realistic. So what I did is I went into lens blur because that will give you a more authentic look. So I did. But before I did this, I actually copied my layer and traced out my subject. So that way I could isolate them, and then they were sharp, but the blurred background is separate. Now here's the thing. Sure, that can in theory work, but you're still getting that weird blurred halo, which is a dead giveaway of AI blur or anything like that. So how did I fix that? Well, I'm glad you asked. I took the clone stamp tool, put it to a really, really small size, and went along the edge of my subject here and just filled in wherever that was haloing. So that way, there was no weirdness coming from the blur there. Now, one thing where I noticed it didn't quite do the real look of how it should be, and if I played around with it more, I could obviously get this dialed in, but I didn't. So what happens is, optically, when you have a focal plane, the further away into the background you go, the more out of focus it is. but this lens blur kind of just blurs everything the same. So there's not a lot of fall off there. And the easy way to emulate this is take a brush and use a low fill or opacity. Just kind of pass over that and have it so it's really intense in the background, and then closer on the ground, just kind of smooth it out a little bit so there's a little more texture there. But when you do that, the blur gets a little weird. Now, the way to fix this would be to create multiple layers with varying levels of blur and then kind of just blend them all together. Now, from these images, you can see that's not what I did, and that's why it still looks a little bit AI-ish. But if you really wanted to put the time into it, you could get it dialed in properly. But even for that, even for the little bit of work that I put into this, just to do it super quick, you can see it's actually very comparable to the quality out of the Canon EOS R. Now, the big difference here is if you zoom in really close, you're gonna notice a big difference. That's where you're really gonna notice is in those details, or if you printed it pretty big. But if you're looking at it and it's just on Instagram or social media or anything like that, you're not really gonna notice a difference. My light died. But when you post them to social media or anything like that, you're not really gonna notice a difference. So really, I mean, you can get a super high quality result out of using your phone and a little bit of technical ingenuity. So I always like trying to wrap my head around how you can make one thing look like another, how you can just play around with different setups to make things work in a different way. Especially because we see a lot of these shot on iPhone things, but how do they actually get those photos to look professional or like they should? So this is a way to break down all those walls and show you what it takes to take something like this and get it to the quality of something like this. Because the gap is closing, but if you know how to edit a photo and how to color grade it and all that, you can make it look that much better. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you're somebody who takes a lot of photos on your phone, then maybe, just maybe, you got some value out of this. If you did, make sure to drop a like, leave a comment if you want to see more different phone photo tutorials from me in the future. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell to be notified for all future videos. Work hard, rest often, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.